Deemed, rehabilitated, and real entertaining. This is the Carl Jackson Podcast.
All right, welcome to this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. Let me start here. I'm going to talk about several things today, but I want to talk about Damar Hamlin versus Colin Kaepernick and the impact that they had on American society. You guys may recall the story of Damar Hamlin. It was recent. It's been big news, obviously, if you pay attention to sports or the NFL, or even if you don't. Damar Hamlin has been a major headline. He suffered a cardiac arrest or a heart attack on the field in the first quarter of last week's football game, and it was a very, very scary moment and a touching moment. It looks like Damar Hamlin is going to recover, Lord willing, fully. He's woken up. He's speaking. He communicated with his team in latter part of last week. He also communicated a message yesterday. We'll play some video for you in just a second here, just shortly here. So we're going to talk about that. And before I move on, I actually want to focus there for just a second. Got plenty of other topics. Obviously, Kevin McCarthy has become speaker. Biden has visited the border. Finally, I'll give you my take on that. And also, obviously, the big news. Also, more big news is Ashli Babbitt's mom was arrested. So I'm going to talk about that as well. But first, let's deal with this issue of Damar Hamlin versus Colin Kaepernick. Again, Damar Hamlin suffered the cardiac arrest for whatever reason. I have my suspicions. I did it on a show last week. You can check it out, thecarljacksonshow.com, SalemPodcastNetwork.com, wherever you get your podcasts. I have my suspicions. I know other people have other suspicions, and that's fine. We can debate on that, right? Hopefully doctors will be honest about what happened with him regardless. There's Damar Hamlin, and then there's Colin Kaepernick. Colin Kaepernick, social justice warrior. Damar Hamlin, a guy living the American dream. Colin Kaepernick, someone that was unable to cut it in the NFL. You have Damar Hamlin, who started out as a 6th-round draft pick and progressed and got better and better and better until he became a starter, and he had a bright future ahead of him, whereas Colin Kaepernick, his star was starting to dwindle. You had Damar Hamlin, who united Americans and actually showed us the true spirit of America, that America isn't some systemically racist place that the left would like to pretend that we are. That, in fact, most of America has moved past the issue of race, where the color of your skin is really not an issue, except for those that are on the left, except for those that are in academia, except for those that are in the LGBTQ community, except for those that want to make ad dollars in major corporations in the United States of America. That's where race is an issue. But Colin Kaepernick, instead of uniting Americans like Damar Hamlin did, albeit through an injury that he suffered, Colin Kaepernick divided Americans. Damar Hamlin united Americans. Colin Kaepernick divided Americans, made everything racist. He made, in my opinion, more young black men die on the streets in urban America because he was an instrumental part in this defund the police movement. And when you defund the police, what happens? The victims of crimes, mostly of violent crimes, by a large number, are young black men. Also the major perpetrators of crime. So what do you think happened when police pulled back? Violent crime skyrocketed, particularly in blue cities across the country. You can thank Colin Kaepernick for that. So again, you have Damar Hamlin, he united Americans. Colin Kaepernick divided Americans, and it had major consequences. When it came to Damar Hamlin, what did Americans do? We kneeled, but we kneeled for different reasons. We kneeled in prayer. With Damar Hamlin, we recognized that there was a powerful God, a God that can bring about unity, a God that can bring about healing. And he proved that a lot of Americans aren't as atheistic or as agnostic as they might pretend to be. Whereas you had this fool in Colin Kaepernick that kneeled in protest. Again, dividing Americans. A spoiled brat versus someone that's living the American dream. You had Damar Hamlin, who made sports neutral again. Whereas you had Colin Kaepernick, who made sports political. We all need sports as an escape. That's what sports does. It doesn't matter about the color of your skin. It matters about you. What matters when it comes to sports is your team's colors, not the color of your skin. You can be in the stands with somebody that's rich, poor, black, white, Asian, Latino, does not matter. All that matters is that they're wearing the colors of your team. And all of a sudden, there's some type of bond that's created there. That's the power of sports. That's what Colin Kaepernick took away. That's what Damar Hamlin has given back to us. That's the difference. That's the difference between Damar Hamlin and Colin Kaepernick. God bless Damar Hamlin. Colin Kaepernick, you suck. All right, now let's move on. All right, again, just a quick reminder, subscribe to the podcast wherever podcasts are found, thecarljacksonshow.com, salempodcastnetwork.com. Follow me on social media at The Carl Jackson Show. That is at The Carl Jackson Show. And please support MyPillow, mypillow.com. Mike Lindell, fabulous patriot, fabulous CEO of MyPillow, providing American jobs, American products. Please go to mypillow.com, click in my name, or click on the radio listener square. Use my name in the promo code CARL, Carl, spelled the correct way. I met somebody who spelled it differently over the weekend, but it was a great time at Always Armed. I love you guys out there with the American adversaries, Matt Bubb and Dave Boone Benton. And his co-author Sarah were out there to promote their book, Benghazi, Know Thy Enemy. Make sure you check it out and get it online. But please, again, help. You can help this podcast. You can support American jobs and American manufacturing. MyPillow.com. Take advantage of all of the deals that are available by using my name, MyPillow.com. Click on that radio listener square, enter the promo code Carl, or give them a call, 1-800-858-0263. Okay, so we touched on Damar Hamlin versus Colin Kaepernick. All right, now I want to move on. Several issues that I want to talk about. Biden visits the border for the first time in God knows how long. I believe it's been 14, 15 years, maybe as long as that, since he's visited the border. I want to touch on that. Ashli Babbitt's mom was arrested. I want to touch on that. Kevin McCarthy becomes speaker. I'm going to get into the issue with Kevin McCarthy becoming speaker, because I want you guys to understand, and I've spoke about it last week, but now we have the end result. I want you to understand that as a result of the so-called 20 holdouts, which are really heroes, you have more power. You get that, right? You now understand that 10% of the Congress represents you, and the other 90, not so much. You get that, right? That's really what happened. And I'm not saying there's some good ones that aren't in the 90%. Obviously, Jim Jordan is fabulous. Obviously, Marjorie Taylor Greene represents we the people, no doubt about it. But what you saw was 10% of the House GOP fighting for you. I don't care if you're conservative. I don't care if you're a moderate. I don't care if you're a little more liberal when it comes to a Republican. You've just been empowered, and you have the only people that were willing to fight for you, the Freedom Caucus, that did it, regardless of their motivations. I don't give a damn about their motivations, and I'll explain why that's so insane and doesn't matter. And sadly, many people in conservative media were bashing these people when they just did us a hell of a favor. So we'll get into that. But Biden visits the El Paso border. Biden visits the border, El Paso. All right. Well, here's what happens. Biden visits the border, but he has his administration. He has local authorities, local CBP clean up the place. Clean up the place. Now, why would they clean up the place for Biden? Could it just be the guy wanted photo ops? Because now there's pictures that surface of him on Breitbart walking with Border Patrol agents along border fencing that he wanted no part of, and no mention, by the way, of the or apologizing for the smears against the Border Patrol agents on horseback that were using their reins, not whips, their reins, to make sure they turned back illegal immigrants and forced them to go a certain direction without being hurt by the horses that they were on. Whereas his administration, Mayorkas, and the mainstream media claimed that they were whipping the migrants. Just didn't say no apology over that. But he visits the border. There's got to be something happening. What's happening? What is he trying to do? What is the left doing? Because they're all in this together, right? Mainstream media, Democrat Party, big tech, they're all in this together. Major corporations, they're all in this together. What is Biden trying to do? Does he disrespect the media so much, and I believe he does, or his administration, that they want to give them the appearance that, hey, this border crisis, it doesn't really exist. This border crisis that the left is, or that the right is talking about, that conservatives like Julio Rosas and Bill Malugin and other people that have been reporting on the border, Sarah Carter, it's really not as bad as they say that it is. And the sycophantic Democrat media or the mainstream media wants to buy into it because they'd rather they be right. They'd rather their side be right rather than protect the American people. So one, are they trying to dupe the sycophantic media? That's a possibility. Another possibility is that Biden is just a puppet and there's someone else that is running the show. Now, I suspect that. I'll be honest with you. There's someone else that's calling the shots. And they don't want Biden to know how bad things really are on the border. That's a possibility. Another thing may just be pure incompetence. And that Biden cannot comprehend, even if he tried, even if he was of sound mind, he could not comprehend how bad things really are on the border, even if he did see it. But his administration, the puppeteers running his administration, don't want him to see the crisis because perhaps he might do something about it in an effort to win the presidency. And I do at this point believe that he's going to run for the presidency because why not? We had, in the Republican Party, we had such a miserable showing during the midterms. Why wouldn't he run? Why wouldn't he run? I would if I were him. I mean, you get to live out your days eating ice cream and pudding, flying all across the world whenever you want, vacationing every single weekend on the taxpayer dime, enrich your family, your crackhead son, and your disgusting brother and family members. Why not? Why not run again? Now there's the story. All right, so three things that happened there. I just want to make sure I reiterate this. Biden is visiting the border for the first time, but local authorities are cleaning up his mess. Either he's trying to dupe the media that's coming along with them for the ride. Biden's just a puppet, and he doesn't know that there is a border crisis at all, right? Someone else is pulling the strings. He doesn't know, and if he did know, maybe he would react. Maybe he would react. You know, he can't comprehend how bad his policies actually are. Maybe if he saw it, he would react. His puppeteers don't want him to see it. All those, in my opinion, are a possibility. All right, moving on. And did you guys hear about this? Ashli Babbitt's mom. Ashli Babbitt. You know Ashli Babbitt. She was the woman that, in my opinion, was murdered by Capitol Police Officer Michael Byrd, a man that left his firearm loaded inside of a restroom where someone could have stolen it and committed a crime or killed themselves or killed someone else. Who knows? Who knows? But this guy that left his loaded firearm killed Ashli Babbitt when she entered into the Capitol building. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that Ashli Babbitt shouldn't have been crawling through the window. I totally get how that looks bad. My understanding is she was trying to advance and get in front of a crowd that was getting a little too rowdy. This is a lady that served our country for over a decade, all right? This isn't some lady that's going in there to hurt people or cause trouble, and she was unarmed. She was unarmed. You know, the left loves that narrative. She was unarmed. You're telling me that she couldn't get a warning, that somebody couldn't push her back? I understand she's pretty tiny. Somebody couldn't push her back. Somebody couldn't use pepper spray or mace to force her back, to call her off. The first thing she gets is a warning shot in the neck by Michael Byrd. The guy should be fired at the very least. Should be fired at the very least. Showed no regard for human life, showed no training, it seems to me, whatsoever. If your first instinct when a lady is behind a huge wooden door to shoot, there's an issue. Okay, now, Ashli Babbitt's mom was arrested. She was protesting the murder of her daughter that occurred 2 years ago on the anniversary of J6, and she was arrested by Capitol Police. Oh, Carl, maybe she deserved to be arrested. Maybe she was causing a... Oh. Contraire, mon frere. Now, Ashli Babbitt's widow made an appearance on Tucker Carlson. And Ashli Babbitt's widow explained that his mother-in-law had actually been protesting there for several months, daily, over the murder of her daughter. She, in fact, had been there, I believe, if I recall correctly, since the summer of 2022, or late summer of 2022. So she'd been there for months. But it was only on January 6th that the Capitol Police decided to arrest her. Why? Why is that? I'll tell you why. It's because all the Democrat Party has is a narrative. They don't have good policies. Hakeem Jeffries is only speaker, only the minority leader because he's black. That's it. I hate to bust this bubble. Call me any name you want. I hate to bust your bubble. Hakeem Jeffries is a left-wing kook, straight up radical, straight up Marxist. And now he leads the Democrat Party. Lets you know exactly where they're at. And he's still promoting this J6 narrative. Why? Because their policies don't work. Because there's violence in blue cities. There's unemployment in blue cities. There's high inflation in blue cities. There's a lack of people being able to afford housing in blue cities. Blue cities are complete and utter chaos. They can't focus on the damage that their policies have done to the country. So what do? They perpetuate this narrative that we're under siege by domestic terrorists, all the while ignoring Black Lives Matter, all the while ignoring Antifa, those terrorists. And the trans terrorists that set a 118-year-old church, I believe it was, on fire in Portland, Oregon. Oh, and by the way, did you guys know that who was it? Was it the FBI, the DOJ that gave away Governor Kristi Noem's social security number? Her social security number, oh, they just let it out. Her husband's, her 3 children, oh, they just let it out. Their information from when Kristi Noem and her family visited the White House in December of 2020. Wow, pretty amazing, huh? That's who we're dealing with on the left. That's who we're dealing with. So now they arrest Ashli Babbitt's mom to keep the narrative going. Murdered her daughter. Now they arrest the mom. Okay, now I want to get onto this because this is very, very important. I want you to understand what happened with this speaker's race with Kevin McCarthy is extremely important. And sadly, to my chagrin, to my disappointment, there were many conservatives coming out and saying, man, these troublemakers, these holdouts, what are they doing? What are they doing? I'm going to talk to you about the concessions they get. And I want you to understand, if you call yourself a Republican, if you call yourself a patriot, if you call yourself a lover of freedom, I want you to understand that those people, regardless of being called far right-wing radicals, they fought for you. They empowered you. I want you to understand. Now you know that only 10% of the GOP in the DC swamp care about you. Only 10%. That is the biggest takeaway. Only 10% of the GOP care enough about you to fight for what's best for you, to fight for what's best for the people. That is the major takeaway. Not that we have 20 holdouts, but that 20 Republicans may have just saved the republic by empowering you. That's the real story. That is the real story. And it's sad because we act like we have the Stockholm syndrome. Republicans do. Oh, we don't want rhinos. We don't want rhinos. And then we have an opportunity to push back. Oh my God, what are they doing? What are they doing? What are they doing? Well, shut up and step aside. If you're not going to be a part of the fight, just shut up and step aside. And let us do the work of restoring the nation. Let the conservatives, the true conservatives, do the work. And you can thank us later. That's what really happened. You got 10% that are willing to fight for you. All right, so let's go over some of the details. So I'm not just a big mouth talking on air. Let's go over some of the details. First off, let me share with you a couple things. I was reading in this book, The Making of America, one of the reference books that I use, and I want to be sure of I always go back to what the founders intended, and when they were building and creating our Constitution, what they intended for the Speaker of the House, for example. So here's what the political power that the Speaker has. All right. And this is what the founders intended. He supervises the daily business of the House. He decides which member will be recognized to speak. He appoints the members to the special conference committees. That's really important. He can vacate the chair in order to debate on an issue or to cast a vote. If need be, he follows the vice president in line of succession to the president. All right, so the Speaker does have some very important jobs. What is a committee chairman? This is very important because some of our conservative colleagues won those committee chairmanships. They supervise much of the legislative process. We haven't had a lot of legislative process in Washington, D.C. Thanks to the 20 holdouts, it looks like we will again. Thanks to the 20 heroes. Thanks to the 20 heroes. That's what they're going to be called on the Carl Jackson Show. Thanks to the 20 heroes, we're going to have a legislative process. They decide which bills will be considered and in what manner they will be treated. The attitude of a committee chairman is a major factor in determining whether a bill assigned to his committee will be defeated or passed into law. Committee chairmen are chosen by the majority party in a private meeting called a party caucus. Now, I understand that Democrats still control the Senate and they control the House. And so we're not going to get as much legislative things done as we want. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't fight for them. We can investigate now, right? We can hold some of these elected people and these bureaucrats accountable for the lies and distortion, the disinformation and the misinformation, FBI, DOJ, all of these things we can do now. We would not, in my opinion, have been able to do were it not for the 20 heroes that were willing to hold out on Kevin McCarthy's speakership until they got these concessions. Very, very important that you understand. And it's not unique. You had a lot of people talking like it was the most unique thing in history. And it's simply not true. It's simply not true. Okay, so here are some of the concessions. After 15 roll calls, all right, so here are some of the concessions. So the 20 heroes got some serious concessions. The concessions include changes to how the House is run. We'll get into that. Placing members of the House Freedom Caucus on key committees, and the creation of a committee to conduct a major investigation into the FBI. All right. Here's a quote from Matt Gaetz. And he's one of the ones that's being bashed. And, oh, man, he wasn't in it for the right purposes. So what? So what? This is the problem, man. I'm telling you, Republicans and conservatives don't know how to win. We only know how to bend over, capitulate, and acquiesce. That's all we know how to do. This is a new era. You're not fighting a Democrat party. You're fighting a fascist party, a party that will team up with big business, that will team up with big tech, that will team up with the DOJ and the FBI to squash you so that they can control you. We're in a different world. I don't care if Matt Gaetz stood against Kevin McCarthy because he wanted a lollipop. All that matters, and don't listen, there's some brilliant people, brilliant conservatives. Oh, they did this, they did that, and blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter. All that matters is the end result. The end result is thanks to Matt Gaetz and the others that stood against McCarthy and got the concessions needed in order to make the House again, you're empowered. That's all that matters. That's all that matters in politics. For God's sakes, people, wake up. I was astonished to see so many conservatives. Oh my God, what are they going to do? The sky is falling. We got to find a speaker right now, this hour, this minute, today. It's got to happen today. What? Oh my God. Just so you know, Republicans get caught up in hysterics too. Man, it was surreal. But Matt Gaetz, here's what he said, and I quote, "I feel like the American people won. I feel that the House of Representatives will be a healthier institution." He's right. Many of these things had been resisted by Kevin McCarthy as early as Monday, and now we have an exquisite ruse package. So it took nearly a week, but now you're empowered. You're empowered. Now we do hope and we do want these guys to stick together battling forward. They'll need to stick together, but this process had to happen. Well, what about if moderates, what if they decide to go out on a limb? What if 20 of them decide not to? You know what? Moderates have been stabbing us in the back for 20 or 30 years. How about this? Expect it. Let's call them and let's put pressure on them. How about that? For God's sakes, man. We don't want rhinos. We want to win. Oh my God, we're winning. I'm scared. What the hell? God almighty. Some of these people, I want one in a foxhole with me, for God's sakes. Crazy. Insane. Don't be one of those people. Guys, we're in a fight. I'm sorry. We're in a silent or a soft civil war. Understand that. I'm not saying that to be hyperbolic. Understand where we are. Understand where we are. Do these concessions sound bad to you? Getting a vote on a border security plan, does that sound bad to you? Getting a vote so we know that which Republicans actually stand for our sovereignty and those who don't, those who actually want to get the border crisis, Biden's border crisis, under control. Shouldn't we know that? So we know who to fire? That's extreme to you? Another concession. A budget that doesn't allow the debt ceiling to increase? Why do we need the debt ceiling to continually increase when we're living in inflationary times? We got $32 trillion in debt. We're $32 trillion in debt. We need to keep increasing our annual deficits. We can't come up with a balanced budget. We have to keep budgeting by way of crisis every couple of months or a few months, a continued resolution instead of setting an annual budget. For God's sakes, man, what's wrong with that? Huh? What's extreme about that? And into all COVID mandates? China just ended it, and they're a communist country. We shouldn't end all of our COVID mandates? When we know that these fools lied to us about virtually everything when it came to COVID? And funding. No more COVID funding either. All of these hospitals that were getting rich, working with the federal government to keep the narrative rolling. A term limit vote? We shouldn't have a term limit vote. I'm not even one that's for term limits. I would rather the voters be informed. But after what I saw last week, when people were in complete hysterics on the right, I started thinking maybe term limits are a good thing, because I try to put my faith in you. I don't put my faith in. I don't put my faith in the politicians. I got to be frank with you, even on the Republican side. I don't get into the personality. Sometimes I wish I did, because there's a lot of excitement in it. I'm not going to lie to you. But I just don't put my faith in politicians. I just don't. Even the ones that are on our side, even the ones that I consider the good guys. Because you know what? They can bow to pressure. They're human, just like you and I are. When they go to Washington, D.C., what we should do is when we elect them, we should make sure that they fight for the things that we believe in. And when they don't, fire them. It's as simple as that. And I love Jim Jordans. I love the Jim Jordans. I love the Chip Roys. I love the Lauren Boeberts. I love the Matt Gaetz. I love I love these guys, the Dan Bishops. But when they stop advancing the will of the people, I'm down for firing them. I mean, that's politics. That's the way politics should be for all of us. That's the way. Otherwise, we get screwed. Ultimately, we get screwed. You know, these politicians will go to Washington, D.C., and they'll leave and they'll get cush jobs. They'll get great pay from some lobbying firm or some other great job because of their name recognition, and we're stuck with the bill. So I'm like, use them just as much as they use us. That's the way that it is. That's the way politics should be, frankly. All right. So term limited votes, single subject bills. Aren't you guys tired of these so-called omnibus bills where they just stuff tons of nonsense in them and they get all of these earmarks? All these people get hooked up in their district. Rather than talking about a bill that's just for border security, it ends up being about green energy and providing, more forestry money for this, or supporting this nature project or this bridge to nowhere. Aren't you sick of that? Aren't you sick of that? What? I don't understand what's wrong with this. What's wrong with these concessions? Allowing at least 72 hours given for members to read bills instead of, hey, here's a bill that myself, Kevin McCarthy, and the other leaders, right, spoke about behind closed doors that you had no say in. There's no amendment process. So even if my people, if I'm a representative, so even if my voters, even if my constituents called me, I have no way of amending the bill because I don't even get a say. We don't get debate. We don't get anything on the bill. So perhaps my constituents don't even want me to vote on this thing, but I have no choice because I don't know what's in it. And now Kevin McCarthy, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and Mitch McConnell are just telling me I've got to vote for or against it. And I'm like, okay, I kind of think this is what it's about. So I'm going to vote yes. And then you vote yes, and you find out there's 1,000 things that you're against in the bill. So a single subject bill is good. If you're voting on funding Ukraine, vote on that. That way we can hold people accountable. You know, if you're voting on border security, vote on that. I don't understand what's so radical about this. Another key provision is allowing for any member to introduce a motion to vacate the chair, meaning that members can demand a vote to remove the speaker from the position. And a lot of people are sitting there saying, see, one person has the power to remove the speaker. It can go willy-nilly. Okay. So 20 people have the power to get another speaker, and they couldn't accomplish it. Why? Because a lot more wanted Kevin McCarthy as the speaker. So this isn't as crazy as it sounds. One person can make a motion. Does not mean squat. It just means that there'll be a debate over it. That's it. That's it. And maybe something more will come out of it. Maybe others will say, you know, you're right. Kevin McCarthy sucks. And maybe there will be a windfall of people that will say, you know what, Kevin McCarthy sucks. He really hasn't done much for the Republican Party, for the Republican voters. Let's move on. We need another speaker because this guy simply isn't cutting it. He's still kissing the behind of the K Street, the K Street lobby, if you will. And he's not in line. He's not in touch with the average American voter. So we need to get rid of him. Okay, so maybe that builds. But please, you got conservatives making this sound like it's the most ominous thing ever when this is going back to Jeffersonian times, something that the founders wanted. Here's another quote from the Freedom Caucus. Any power that limits the speaker's power is a step in the right directions. The Freedom Caucus is more relevant than ever, and McCarthy won't be able to get anything done without our endorsement and support. I heard this, I think, on Dr. Sebastian Gorka's show, but I believe he was quoting Dan Bongino. And Dan Bongino, if I recall correctly, said something to the effect of, and I think this is true, by the way, that you have about 20% of the House GOP caucus that represent 70-80% of the voters, of the constituents. And that's true. You have to understand that the vast majority of Republicans that go to the Hill, that become congressmen, are there to serve their best interests. It's a career move for them. They really don't care about you. And then you have 10, I don't think it's 20, but you have probably 10% that actually do care about you. And that's what we have to understand. That's what we have to understand. Members of the Freedom Caucus will also reportedly be placed on the Rules Committee, the Appropriations Committee, committees that are crucial to how the House runs and how funding is doled out. You understand, for the last several decades, the conservatives have just been frowned upon. John Boehner hated them. And they've just been frowned upon. Paul Ryan couldn't stand us. Thought he was one of us. They found that he couldn't stand us. I mean, this is the first time since the Newt Gingrich revolution that conservatives will actually have a voice at the table. And dare I say, since Republicans haven't had a real voice at the table with these committee assignments, look at what has happened in America. From cultural rot to $32 trillion in debt, to foreign policy that's a total disaster under this Biden administration. Another key concession, the guarantee that a church-style committee will be formed to look into the politicization of the FBI. Now, I looked into this church-style committee thing, and I just want to read off some information to you that I looked up. I wanted to make sure that I understood it. This is from the National Constitution Center. On January 27, 1975, Senator Frank Church led a new Senate committee formed to investigate allegations of U.S. government spying on its own citizens. The committee's report laid the groundwork for today's controversy over NSA surveillance programs. Back in the post-Watergate era, Church and his colleagues weren't concerned with an international terrorism, but there was an overseas connection to Chile. The committee was a reaction to revelations that the FBI and the CIA appeared to engage in unconstitutional surveillance of Americans during the era. All right. That's what we see with J6. That's what we've seen. That's what we've seen. There are elements of the story that seem familiar today. The article goes on to say on December 22nd, 1974, Seymour Hersh, a New York Times investigative journalist, reported on a previously confidential CIA operation that involved Chile. Part of Hersh's report also detailed what appeared to be illegal spying operations on thousands of Americans by their own government. The Church Committee labored against government concerns about revealing confidential information, and it didn't receive wide bipartisan support in Congress, but its resulting reports in 1976 led to momentum in Congress to pass the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, the FISA Act of 1978. Under FISA, the National Security Agency, the NSA, would now work with the Secret Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court to approve surveillance on Americans and foreign nationals. All right. So now we're looking for a committee that will hold the FBI and the DOJ accountable. I would prefer to disband them altogether, but this is not likely to occur with Biden in the White House and Chuck Schumer still controlling the Senate, thanks to Mitch McConnell, who literally gave it away. Mitch McConnell is a disgrace and has to go. He is a complete and utter disgrace. All right, and has to go. All right, now, the Church Committee investigated CIA abuses in the 1970s, which led to the exposure of things like the infamous MK Ultra program. I was told about this before by someone. I didn't even know what it was. And, it sounded kooky, sounded crazy. Turns out it was real. All right. So MK Ultra, what is MK Ultra? MK Ultra was a top secret CIA project in which the agency conducted hundreds of clandestine experiments, sometimes on unwitting U.S. citizens, to assess the potential use of LSD and other drugs for mind control, information gathering, and psychological torture. Through Project MK Ultra that lasted from 1953 until about 1973, so 20 years thereabouts. Details of the illicit program didn't become public until 1975. This is history.com, by the way. During a congressional investigation into widespread illegal CIA activities within the United States and around the world, the Cold War and Project MK Ultra in the 1950s and 60s, the height of the Cold War, the U.S. government feared the Soviet, Chinese, and North Korean agents were using mind control to brainwash U.S. prisoners of war in Korea. In response, Alan Dulles, director of the CIA, approved Project MK Ultra in 1953. The covert operation aimed to develop techniques that could be used against Soviet bloc enemies to control human behavior with drugs and other psychological manipulators. The program involved more than 150 human experiments involving psychedelic drugs, paralytics, and electroshock therapy. Sometimes the test subjects knew they were participating in a study, but at other times they had no clue. Even when the hallucinogens started kicking in. All right, so that's the power that the House Freedom Caucus has garnered. Power to look into this stuff to make sure these people aren't abusing their power, aren't abusing you. Here's what Dan Bishop, one of the 20 heroes, said, and I quote, "With the Ruse Agreement we negotiated, we will have a powerful church-style committee to go after the weaponization of the federal government, the FBI, DOJ, the Department of Homeland Security, and all the rest. This is a victory for the constitutional rights of all Americans." He's absolutely right. He's absolutely right. Do you think Kevin McCarthy would have signed on to this stuff if these 20 didn't make a big, spectacle, if you will, of things. And I don't say that to sound demeaning. They had to make a spectacle of it. I don't understand why these people had to go on camera. I don't understand why these people had to do it like this. Because if they didn't do it like this, they wouldn't have gotten the concessions that they needed. Kevin McCarthy's aim was to embarrass them instead and get them to bow down to him. Instead, they embarrassed him, so he bowed down to us. You get it? Kevin McCarthy wanted the Freedom Caucus, who represents 750,000 people in their districts, approximately, to bow down to him. 20 people, 20 patriots, I think at one time 21, got Kevin McCarthy to bow down to we the people. You get that? That's what happened. And you got conservatives in a straight up panic last week. It was a shame. They were embarrassed of the 20. I was embarrassed of them. I couldn't believe some of the stuff that I was hearing on radio, on television. It was insane. What's your plan? What's your plan? The plan is to get concessions. What the hell do you think the plan is? To get Kevin McCarthy to bow down to concessions or move aside. And if he moved aside, guess what? People that didn't want to step on his toes, like Steve Scalise, would have stepped up. And they knew this. Unbelievable, man. God, we are so full of wimps. I'm sorry. We're fighting a different war. We can't be wimpy anymore. Besides, this isn't unique. Let me just go through this real quick. What happened this past weekend happened at least 14 times before. The Daily Signal, Fred Lucas at the Daily Signal. After voters decided, or here it is, Representative Kevin McCarthy's tough climb to the speakership seems rare in the modern era, but brawls over the top house job are not uncommon. Historically, he writes, after voters decided which party would control the House, the elected lawmakers battled in 14 instances when electing a speaker, which required multiple ballots. 14 separate times this has happened. You hear about those times? Or you just hear about the 20 holdouts? The 20 holdouts. Man, it was a century ago in 1923, he writes, when a speaker's race last went to multiple ballots. However, all right, so notably in decades past, after congressional races in November, a new Congress wasn't sworn in until March of the next year. We're panicking over a few days, right? At the turn of the early 20th century, they will wait for a few months before they chose a speaker. But we're in a complete panic. Number 3, for example, after the 2022 midterm elections, the vote for House Speaker came in December of 23. Did you hear me? After the 1922 midterm elections, the vote for House Speaker came in December 23. Did you guys notice that the sky didn't fall that entire week that we hadn't chosen a speaker? You guys notice that? You guys understand that the left is still concerned that there's going to be investigations into J6, DOJ, all these things that the right should do, that Republicans should do. You understand that they're still concerned about that. And you understand now that the Republicans actually have teeth to compel Kevin McCarthy to allow them to do these investigations and not just sweep them under the rug. So not only will we get to do these investigations, we'll actually have teeth to them now. There'll actually be some teeth because you got some conservatives that are on the committee. Now, for those that say this hasn't happened before, it's happened before. Again, 14 times. But here's 7. The Never Nancy Democrats will go through that. Re-electing Newt Gingrich will go through that. A record 133 ballots, replacing Henry Clay. Slavery and 63 ballots. Number 5. Number 6, Republicans rising. Number 7, a century earlier. All right, so let's just go through these real quick. For those of you that think this is unique, for those of you that think these 20 holdouts were just showing off. No. These 20 holdouts, these 20 heroes, may have just saved the republic. Again, this happened in 2018 with Democrats. Did you know that? Because all of the conservatives that were in complete hysterics last week forgot to mention this. See, the narrative is that Democrats always stick together. And to some degree, that's true. But it's because they're beat down before they become robots. They're robots. We're not robots in the Republican Party. And I admit sometimes that stinks when we want to advance an agenda. I'm willing to concede that. But let's not pretend like Democrats aren't there's not disunity among Democrats at times. In 2018, Democrats won control of the House, but 21 of the newly elected and returning Democrats vowed during the campaign that they would not vote for Nancy Pelosi again as Speaker. She had been Speaker in 2000 and 2000 from 2007 to 2011. A lot of people didn't like her. I mean, she governs with an iron fist. Of the 21 Democrats, 13 were freshmen. The squad, those people, Another previously had won a special election in Pennsylvania. There were a mix of far-left progressives and deep blue congressional districts where Pelosi was viewed as out of touch. And then in moderates who ran red and purple districts who didn't like her politics. So the far, and she is far left. But the radicals, the freaking communists of the party, didn't like Nancy Pelosi, but neither did the moderates. So she struggled to become Speaker. Another 19 Democrats were non-committal. You didn't hear the conservatives that were in complete hysterics explaining this to you last week. So I'm going to do it this week. Nancy Pelosi insisted on unity optics, right? So here's what she wanted to do, but the squad wasn't having it. Initially, Democrats' goal was to allow these new members to keep their promise by opposing Pelosi for Speaker in a meeting of the House Democratic Caucus. So behind closed doors, they could disavow her all they wanted to, but they were to support her on the House floor because they needed that optics, the unity optics, all right? But the 16 Democrats formalized their opposition by signing a letter asserting that they were, and I quote, committed to voting for new leadership in both our caucus meeting and on the House floor. They weren't having it. As a result, here's what had to happen. Nancy Pelosi had to agree to AOC. Steny Hoyer did. James Clyburn did. They had to agree to these new squad members coming in, new squad members, and some moderates, that they would step aside in 4 years. So Nancy Pelosi wasn't going to have any, I had forgotten all about this. Nancy Pelosi wasn't going to have any power because the AOCs of the left had weakened her. Now, they stayed in line because they knew that the crazy chick was out in 4 years. All right. They knew it. She was going regardless. I had completely forgotten about that. Now, re-electing Gingrich. And after the 1994 election, you had new House Speaker Newt Gingrich, the Gingrich Revolution. He became a historic figure as the first Republican speaker in approximately 40 years. But during his first term as Speaker, he came under investigation for giving the House Ethics Committee inaccurate information about a televised college course that he had taught. He was scrutinized for not seeking advice about the legality of the financing for the course. Gingrich did apologize over the matter after the 1996 elections. The GOP again held the majority in the House. The leadership election was scheduled for January 8th. Of that year of 97, after a significant media buildup, Gingrich lost only 9 Republicans. All right. Meanwhile, 5 other Republicans abstained. Gingrich was elected Speaker again with 216 votes, just like Kevin McCarthy. And so he won a majority of votes. And that's not the same as winning the majority of votes of the full House. Or, I'm sorry, to be elected Speaker, someone must win an absolute majority of the voters cast. That's not the same as winning the majority of votes of the full House. So of the votes cast. That's why Kevin McCarthy was able to become Speaker with 216 votes as well, because the 6 that continued to hold out at least voted present instead of voting for someone else. So that allowed them to be technically present. That allowed Kevin McCarthy to get a majority of all of the votes. To be able to beat out Hakeem Jeffries for the position. All right, so that's a second one. A third one, a record 133 ballots. We just went to 15. All right, so perhaps the most unusual or not unusual is that the most contentious House Speaker's race in history happened 5 years before the nation was ripped apart by the Civil War. Factionalism was a major problem in 1855 when 21 House members initially ran for Speaker. 21 House members ran for speakers. Issues dividing the country at the time were slavery and immigration. The American Party, also known as the Anti-Mason or Know Nothing Party, had elected members to the House, as had the Anti-Slavery Free Soil Party. So the Free Soil Party was the Anti-Slavery Party. Man, you never hear about them. It's weird. I'll be frank with you. I didn't know they existed until I read this. The Free Soil Party. The Republican Party, founded the year before, was still in its infancy at the time. The House continued voting for about 2 months, and they cast 133 ballots before settling on Representative Nathaniel Banks of Massachusetts. All right. A member of both the American Party and the Free Soil Party. Amazing. Replacing Henry Clay, the fourth time this occurred. Representative John W. Taylor of New York was a member of the National Republican Party, an anti-Jacksonian party in the early 1800s associated with House Speaker Henry Clay and former President John Quincy Adams. In October of 1820, Clay of Kentucky resigned as House Speaker in the middle of the 16th Congress to return to private law practice. Clay had brokered the so-called Missouri Compromise to curb the expansion of slavery into new territories, while leaving slavery alone in the states where it already existed. All right, so from November 13th to 15th, the House sorted through 22 ballots to find a replacement for Clay as a speaker. Number 5, slavery in 63 ballots. Slavery would continue to be a major issue in showdowns over the House speakership. 3 decades later, in 1843, Representative Hal Cobb, he was a Democrat from Georgia, first broke with other Southern House members who had formed a pro-slavery bloc. By 1849, the House was battling over the speakership. Cobb became a popular cross-partisan figure for his strong stance against talk of secession. All right. After 63 ballots, he emerged as a compromise candidate. Cobb presided over the passage of the Compromise of 1850, which admitted California as a free state, allowed the new states of Utah, New Mexico, and New Mexico to decide on slavery for themselves, and he made it easier for slave owners to recover runaway slaves. Not saying these guys were perfect. I'm just talking about the times where this ballot stuff has occurred before. Republicans rising. The Republican Party, which was established in 1854, to fight against slavery and polygamy, won a majority in Congress in 1858 while opposing unpopular President James Buchanan, at the time a Democrat. However, after winning the majority, the new party lacked the votes to elect its top candidate, Representative John Sherman of Ohio. The House went through 44 ballots before settling on a Republican freshman, Representative William Pennington of New Jersey. Pennington was considered a moderate. He gained support from Northern Democrats who disliked Buchanan's policies. Number 7, a century earlier. It was almost a century ago. I talked about this briefly in December 1923 when the last standoff over a speaker went to multiple ballots. A Republican-controlled House with a fairly thin majority had to go through 9 ballots before picking a leader. As it turned out, Republicans picked the existing leader. The 1922 midterms had hit the House Republicans hard. The majority's margin dropped from 171 seats to 18 after Democrats picked up 77 seats. Man, the rebels rode again. Most of the defeated Republicans were allied with President Warren Harding, conservative Republican. The progressive wing of Republicans in the House sought to seize on the election results. The vote for Speaker didn't come until December of 23. After Harding had died and Calvin Coolidge succeeded him as president. On the first day of voting, incumbent Speaker Frederick Gillett, representative from Massachusetts, got 197 votes, and Representative Finis Garrett, a Democrat from Tennessee, got 195. Meanwhile, a combined total of 26 lawmakers voted either present or for one or of 2 of progressives, Republicans Henry Cooper of Wisconsin or Martin Madden of Illinois. The second day of voting was about the same. That night, House Majority Leader Nicholas Longworth, Republican from Ohio, brokered a deal on rules changes to appease the party's progressive wing. After 3 days on the 9th ballot, Gillett was reelected as Speaker with 215 votes. So what you saw was not unique. What you saw was democracy at work. This is the way our House of Representatives should look. The fact is that we've gone so long with Washington telling us what to do instead of us telling them what to do. We didn't know what was happening. Those 20 Republican holdouts, so-called, are heroes. They're heroes. Their motives don't matter. I don't care if it's just because they couldn't stand Kevin McCarthy. That's all they were doing. So what? So what? The end result is you're empowered. Guys, I appreciate you tuning in to this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast. Please subscribe. Please share it with your friends. Please tell your friends about it. Please tell your family members about it. I would really, really appreciate it. So anywhere where you find podcasts, you can find me: Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube, and Rumble. Please check us out online as well. Share the video. We would really appreciate that. Man, speaking of video, we didn't even share the video, Gabe. That's totally my fault. Maybe we'll share the video later in the week. I'm sure these things will pop up again. All right. And also, please follow me on social media. The Carl Jackson Show is where you can find me. Please support my sponsor, MyPillow. Michael and Dale at MyPillow, MyPillow.com. Use that promo code Carl, C-A-R-L. Give them a call, 1-800-858-0263. They got towels, sheets, slippers, you name it, on sale at great discount prices as long as you use the promo code Carl. All right, so C-A-R-L, or give them a call, 1-800-858-0263. Use the promo code Carl there as well. Until next time, guys, don't grow weary doing good. God bless you.